She was ready to marry the man her family chose, until the day she met his brother, and her heart betrayed everything she thought she knew. She had always been the kind of woman who respected tradition, who listened to her family, who believed that love could be built with time and patience. So when her parents told her she was to be engaged to Michael, a man from a respected family, she smiled politely. Because Michael was kind enough, successful, and everyone praised the match as perfect. Yet deep inside, her heart remained quiet, as if waiting for something she could not name, but she pushed those doubts aside, telling herself that love was not always about fireworks, but about duty, security, and the approval of those around her. The engagement was announced with grandeur. Relatives gathered, congratulations flowed, and she tried to convince herself that this was the life she wanted, that being Michael's wife would be enough, until one fateful evening, when she first met his younger brother Adrian, who had been away studying abroad and had returned only for the engagement ceremony. And the moment her eyes met his, something shifted, something she had never felt before, a spark so sudden and undeniable that her breath caught in her chest, and though she quickly looked away, she could not shake the sensation that destiny had just entered the room. Adrian was nothing like Michael. Where Michael was composed and reserved, Adrian was spirited, passionate, and full of warmth that drew people toward him. And though she tried to avoid his gaze, she found herself stealing glances, noticing the way his laughter filled the room, the way his eyes seemed to read her as if he already knew the storm inside her heart. And in that instant, she realized that for the first time in her life, she was afraid because what she felt was wrong, forbidden, and impossible, yet it was also more real than anything she had ever known. In the days that followed, she found excuses to be near him, innocent conversations that stretched longer than they should, accidental touches that lingered just enough to make her heart race. And though neither spoke of what was happening between them, the silence was louder than words because every glance, every smile carried the weight of something dangerous, something that could destroy families and futures, and yet neither of them could stop. She tried to bury herself in wedding preparations, in choosing fabrics and flowers. But even as she smiled for photographs and accepted blessings, her mind wandered to Adrian, to the way he had looked at her that afternoon in the garden, as if she was not Michael's fiancée, but simply a woman he could not let go. And when he whispered to her one evening, "You deserve to marry for love, not for duty," her entire world trembled, because it was the first time anyone had dared to say what she had secretly longed to hear. Still, she fought the feelings, reminding herself of loyalty, of promises, of the pain that betrayal could bring. But love is not something that obeys logic. And the more she tried to distance herself, the more destiny pulled her back to Adrian. Until one night, under the silver glow of the moon, as they stood by the lake behind the family estate, he finally confessed, his voice raw with emotion, that he had fallen for her the moment he saw her, that he had tried to fight it, to respect his brother, but he could no longer keep it inside. And as tears filled her eyes, she admitted she felt the same, though every part of her screamed that it was wrong. And in that confession, they sealed their fate, because once love is spoken, it cannot be silenced. The guilt weighed heavily on her. She could barely look Michael in the eye. Yet Michael, sweet and unsuspecting, continued to plan their future, speaking of houses and children, while she smiled with trembling lips, her heart breaking at the thought of what she was hiding. And all the while, Adrian kept his distance in public, but in stolen moments his eyes told her everything, that he too was drowning in this forbidden love. And as the wedding day drew nearer, the pressure became unbearable, her nights sleepless, torn between duty and love, between the life expected of her and the life her soul yearned for. Finally, on the eve of the wedding, she found herself praying for a sign, something to tell her what to do, and as if fate itself answered, she stumbled upon Michael speaking with his father, their voices low, not of love but of business, of alliances, of how this marriage would benefit their companies, their status. And in that moment, she realized that to Michael, she was not truly a choice of the heart, but a piece in a grand arrangement. And while he did not mean her harm, he did not see her as she longed to be seen, not the way Adrian did, not as a woman with dreams and feelings, but as a symbol of success, and that realization broke something inside her, pushing her closer to the truth she had been too afraid to embrace. The next morning, dressed in white, veil cascading over her shoulders, she walked down the aisle with heavy steps, the hall filled with music and guests, all eyes upon her, Michael waiting with a calm smile. But just as the vows began, her gaze drifted to the back of the room where Adrian stood, his face pale, his eyes burning with pain. And in that moment she knew She could not say yes, not when her heart screamed for another, and with trembling hands, she lowered the bouquet, her voice breaking as she whispered that she could not do this. Gasps filling the hall, Michael's face collapsing into shock, her family frozen in disbelief, but she turned and walked away, her veil slipping from her head like chains falling. And as she stepped toward Adrian, tears streaming, he moved forward too, catching her in his arms as the whispers turned into chaos, and together they walked out, leaving behind expectations, security, and tradition, choosing instead the uncertain path of love. The days after were brutal, families torn apart, reputations questioned, but through it all, they stood side by side, enduring judgment, whispers, and hardships. Yet with every struggle, their bond grew stronger, proving that love chosen in truth is worth any price. And though Michael's heart was broken, in time he found forgiveness, even admitting that he too deserved a love that was real, not arranged. And as years passed, the scandal turned into a story of courage, of a woman who dared to defy tradition for her heart, of a man who loved her enough to risk everything. And together, they built a life not of wealth or perfection, but of laughter, honesty, and unshakable devotion. Their story a reminder whispered through generations that sometimes the heart does not follow rules, and that the bravest thing one can ever do is to choose love even when the world says no.